This week marks a transition from all of the deep Scorpio energy muckiness. We just had that refresh with the Mars Cazimi into Sagittarius season where we get to be more explorative, more fun and adventurous. However, this week there's a little bit of a problem trying to really utilize that energy. Welcome back to the Astrology Report. My name is Cam White, and today we are talking about November 20th through November 26th of 2023. Make sure you guys are subscribed if you're not already, because soon I will be posting the 2024 year ahead horoscope. So if you want to know what 2024 is all in store, make sure you're subscribed so you do not miss that video. Let's go ahead and get started with this week. We have quite a lot of highlights this week, but we start the week off with just the moon ingressing into Pisces. And of course, as it ingresses into Pisces, it will conjoin Saturn immediately. After it conjoins Saturn, the moon will just be making a sextile to Jupiter all day long. So again, as I've been saying, the moon in Pisces is connecting a little bit more to the internal part of us. If Sagittarius is more of the external philosophy, world, ideology kind of stuff, Pisces is more of the internal. You know, kind of a way I've been thinking about the difference between Sagittarius and Pisces is Sagittarius is like what a, maybe not a religious institution, but what like a framework for a religion might look like, versus Pisces is like your own path with that faith, your own experience of that faith, what you feel internally with that. The moon in Pisces is very sensitive and connected to a lot of things, right? However, the moon conjoining Saturn is kind of like, okay, Saturn's been in Pisces now for a little bit less than a year, but we've gotten the vibe now. Saturn is now direct. Moon, our emotions, our body, what we're connected to, it's very sensitive and all over the place. But with Saturn, we need to be a little bit more mature, a little bit more serious, a little bit more disciplined with this, like being able to have an energetic boundary with the things that influence us. And so as the moon conjoins Saturn, there's this kind of like, hey, I can be aware of what's going on around me, and I can be sensitive to it while also having a boundary to it to where it's not directly, affecting me. Like I said this last week, it's the whole, war in the Middle East thing is, it's sad. It's important to talk about, but so many people I see are hyper consuming all of this stuff, and pick your side, whatever that's going to be. But, like I said before, the next few years, we're going to see more of this kind of war stuff. We're going to see more extremes. And if your, empathetic, fuel tank is already halfway empty just with this, like you may not have a lot of energy or emotion to give over the next few years. And so I think it's important to have an energetic boundary. And I'm just using the whole war thing as an analogy at this moment, but where in your life are you really, sensitive to, other people's emotions or your environment, and where can you have a better boundary on that? And sometimes that is both a like mental boundary, but sometimes that's a physical boundary, like, making sure you stay away from certain foods or certain influences that can, alter your behavior. And so as the moon conjoins Saturn on Monday, it's just kind of a serious tone, just being aware, but having that space to have a little bit of a boundary, to have a little bit of separation from it. And as the moon ends up sextiling Jupiter throughout the rest of the day, there is this little bit of like, okay, how do I do this long term? Is this good for my long-term growth? How can I be more sustainable with it? I think I said this in my Jupiter and Taurus video, but I think the term sustainability is really thrown out all the time. It's a marketing term for all of the green environment stuff. But I think it's such an important word with Jupiter and Taurus. It's like, hey, Jupiter's moving slow. Jupiter's about abundance and growth and faith, and it's in the slowest sign. So like, what can we do that is going to bring us the, results that we want long-term and not just immediate gratification? So as the moon sextiling Jupiter, there's a little bit of like, all right, I need a little bit of a boundary of this, and I need to just take my time and my energy, and, you don't have to change your whole life overnight, but like, what are the little things that you can do over time, over a week, over a month, over a year, for you to get to where you need to be? And I think that's what Monday's good for. Now, Tuesday, we will have the moon making a square to Mercury, and then it will make a sextile to Uranus. The thing with the moon in Pisces making a square to Mercury in Sagittarius is Mercury is in detriment right now. This isn't a good time to be like, this is what the plan is, and, let me speak with logic and facts and, all of that stuff. Like Mercury in Sagittarius, Mercury is about, again, logic, rationale, and communication, but it's in its sign of detriment. So it's like, okay, maybe we don't want to have these hard, super, like, this is exactly what I'm going to do. This is exactly what I'm going to say. This is exactly how it has to be. What Mercury in Sagittarius is good for is like being more open-minded, having a lighthearted conversation about ideas where nothing really needs to like, be formulated. I just made this analogy with a client, and I think I actually might have said this in maybe a week or two ago on the weekly, but like Mercury in Sagittarius reminds me of when you're partying with, your buddies and you guys are drunk and you make up a business plan. You're like, oh, we're going to start this business and it's going to be great. And then no, it never really happens, right? Like Mercury in Sagittarius is good for that lighthearted, like pontificating or theorizing or thinking of a bigger idea, but it doesn't necessarily have to be real, if that makes sense. And maybe that does turn into something real as Mercury goes into Capricorn and we have the whole Mercury retrograde here. But it's one of those things where it's like with communication, you have to take it with a grain of salt, and it's better to just play around with ideas and play around with communication rather than being like, no, this is actually this is what the paper says and this is what the statistics say. Like, stop with all that nonsense. But as the moon's in Pisces, making a square to Mercury in Sagittarius, there's this, like, again, our emotions and how we feel aren't easily expressed at the moment. While the moon's in Pisces and we're a little bit sensitive and a little bit, with our heads up in the clouds, the moon making a square to Mercury is like having an inability or having a struggle to communicate exactly how we feel. Being able to use the right words. Like, I think last week I said something wrong. I think it was diplomacy, and everyone was like, you said it wrong. And I'm like, that's just me. Sorry. And sometimes Mercury in Sagittarius might be using the wrong word, might be using a really loaded word that you could probably use a more simple word to describe whatever it is that you're doing or whatever you want to communicate. But on Tuesday, with that moon making that square to Mercury, it's just kind of like it's just going to be difficult to really place how you feel on something and be able to express it with clarity and ease. So when it comes to Tuesday and you're in that situation where maybe you have to express yourself or say how you really feel, maybe you don't have to say anything at all. But maybe another way to look at it is, what can you say without being super descriptive or without being super literal? Because it just sounds like it's not going to be an easy time to describe things. But then the moon will make a sextile to Uranus later on, which, again, the moon in Pisces is just kind of like when you're playing around, hanging out, having fun, you might find, again, Uranus and Taurus, liberation, freedom, instability in the sign of value, goods, stability, security. You might find a innovative and fun way to see a new perspective on, again, like value or, fun. I mean, the moon sextiling Uranus is not the biggest deal. And I know you guys hate when I don't bring up big, like, small little transits because they're all big deals to you guys, but suck it up. It's not that big of a deal. But on Tuesday, something that I will typically say is not a big deal, but I think is a little extra special, is our first highlight of the week, and that's Mars making a sextile to Pluto. We just got done with the Mars Cazimi. We just had this whole reset, this whole death and rebirth of whatever Mars rules in your chart. And as Mars is now combust still, think of a combust planet like a newly born baby. That baby still cannot take care of itself. It doesn't pay taxes. It doesn't, answer phone calls. It is still highly dependent on its parents or its caregivers. Mars being combust after this, Cazimi, is like you're not able to get on your feet yet. This planet was just born. Or, for example, a Mars Cazimi is like a sick or a dying planet. Then the illness ends with the Cazimi, and then it's like rehabilitation time. Like, sure, you might have broken a bone and you might have got a surgery, but you are not, like, if you broke your leg and you had to have surgery, you're not standing on that leg immediately afterwards. You're going to break it again. So there is a time in which it takes Mars to leave the conjunction with the sun and get out of the beams to where it's really on its own. And that's where Mars is still at. Mars is sextiling Pluto, though. Pluto is about power, fear, corruption, transformation, all of those big fun words. What I like about Mars sextile Pluto is the whole power dynamic part of it, where it's just kind of like, I know a lot of people have had very chronic problems and they do something small, like maybe they get a surgery that they've been putting off for forever, or maybe they change one thing or another and it solves that issue and completely transforms the way that they see their body and their life, and they feel empowered by it. And sure, for example, I can't think of an example actually off the top of my head. I guess maybe the one I think of is like someone who like got a nose job or something, which is also very Scorpio. Scorpio rules like smells and noses, which is, there's such a fun conversation to have there. But let's say you've had a big nose and you hated it for whatever reason, and you wanted to get surgery on it, and you're not going to have, like, your face is still going to be wrapped up for a little while, but like you might feel a lot more empowered and a lot more, confident with that being done. And that's like the Mars sextile Pluto. It's like, this is done now, and I'm not ready to take off, the wrapping and the gauze off my face, but I feel more confident. I feel more ready to go. Like, that's the Mars sextile Pluto, where there's this like, hey, we're not hitting the road running yet. We've just made the significant change, but there's a power dynamic to it. Now you're feeling good. Now you're feeling like, again, like I love using the term on a sick one, and it's so funny because none of you guys ever know what I mean by you're on a sick one. Like when you're on a sick one, you're just like, man, I'm feeling good. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. Or, you know, maybe you're just doing something a little bit more extreme that you usually do, but more extreme than usual. Like you're going to be on a sick one. I don't know how else to describe it. Look it up on Urban Dictionary. But the Mars sextile Pluto, I think just after this kind of significant change happens with the Mars cazimi that we just had, there is this feeling of empowerment. There is this feeling of excitement. There's this feeling of like ambition and drive. Although you're not like really like fully, like you're not seeing the full results yet, but because you've made that transition, you are feeling more empowered. Then we get to Wednesday. And on Wednesday, the moon will conjoin Neptune and ingress into Aries. So the moon conjoining Neptune, again, getting a little lost in the clouds, being very idealistic, very rose-colored glasses. Beware of deception. Beware of convolution. See, now you got me like thinking too much about my words. But the moon conjoining Neptune, again, it's a two-way street. It's either really good for being creative and envisioning something that you can have a little bit more control of. The bad part of it is deception, a little bit too pie in the sky, a little bit too rose-colored glasses, not enough realism there. But what I like about the moon conjoining Neptune is, again, being able to tap into that more creative, more like, what is the vision that you want to create for your life? What is the vision that you want to create for, you know, your business or your job or your relationships or your kids, whatever it is. There's a level of looking at things through that idealistic lens and envisioning it, dreaming it. But then the moon goes into Aries, and we're charged up. It's time to take action. The moon is our emotions and what we're, you know, literally emotionally via our bodies connected to. And it's in Aries, and that's action, that's ambition. Mars is in Scorpio, which is, if the moon's in Aries, it's being ruled by Mars in Scorpio. We're on a sick one. But on Wednesday, we got our next highlight, which is the sun will ingress into Sagittarius. And it won't really square Saturn on Wednesday, but I'm just saying it's going to square Saturn because it's like you're going to feel it. The sun ingressing into Sag is our willpower, our vitality. It is our essence, our energy. It is our life-giving force. You know, it's so funny. You can hear the same thing in different ways all the time and not think of it in anything different. But then you hear it in a different way that like totally changes your perspective. And I just thought it was so funny that, you know, we call Earth Mother Earth. And in astrology, the sun is masculine. Men are ruled by the sun. It's like men rule Saturn, Mars, Jupiter, Sun, and then women are ruled by Moon and Venus. And I know some of you are going to get a little bit butthurt about that, but I didn't make the rules. I didn't cook the hot dogs. I'm just selling them. Okay, but the sun is our willpower and our vitality. And the reason I brought up the whole Earth thing is like, without the sun, we wouldn't have any life here. We wouldn't have the warmth. We wouldn't have the, like, we would not survive without the sun. We need that vitality. We need that like masculine energy, whether, you know, again, if you're a man, you need to tap more into that. Or if you're a woman, you need to be more receptive to it. It's so important. Just like, you know, if men being more connected to, when I say connected to the feminine, I think that's also something that the way that is contorted nowadays, it's kind of like, the way I look at it is having like the respect for nature, having the respect for like the yin and the yang, or yan. I always say that wrong too. But the reason I even bring this up is as the sun's in Sagittarius and we are having, we're going from Scorpio to Sag, right? Like Scorpio is like our vitality is really deeply sunk in. It's fixated. It is, I don't want to say contorted. The way I always like to think about Scorpio into Sag is the tension of pulling a rubber band down and down and down and down, and then we let it go, and then we bounce back up. And there's like, it's like, you know, if you put a little pencil or like even a bow and arrow, like the Scorpio is the tension of pulling that back, and Sagittarius is the release of that. And with the sun going into Sagittarius, our vitality, our willpower is expanded and influenced by our sense of philosophy, our sense of optimism, our sense of where are we going? What's the adventure? What's my point B? What am I aiming for? But the issue is the sun square Saturn. With the sun making a square to Saturn, if Saturn is about discipline, maturity, time, old age, responsibility, but also walls, limitations, while the sun wants to bounce forward, I always get this jumbled up, but in like the rules of shooting, like in like say firearm ownership, it's like know your target, know what is beyond your target. And I feel like the sun squaring Saturn is so like not actually having a clear visual on your target. And part of me looks at the more Pisces side of it as the block. What is emotionally blocking you from it? Is it your own sense of like your worth? Is it your own sense of incapability? Is it your own sense of deservingness? And see, I'm not doing the words right here, but I feel like the sun square Saturn with the sun going into Sagittarius is like wanting to have that target, but not actually like you're having a little bit of a block to it. Like, it's so funny. We all have these dreams and goals in our lives, but as we get older and as, you know, the world, you know, wears us down, we slowly chop at what that goal is supposed to look like into more of a quote unquote realistic goal, to where whatever our goal is actually doesn't line up at all to what our goals were when we were like 5 years old or 8 years old or 12 years old or 18. And so I look at that sun square Saturn as like, is this really the target you want to hit? Is this really where you want to go? Is this really what your like lights you up? And so I feel like the sun square Saturn is having the vitality come to you and the willpower and the energy come to you via, you know, again, optimism, envisioning, confidence, fun, jovial givingness. But with it squaring Saturn is like, hey, where are you at with that? Are you stopping yourself from there? Like, you can go wherever you want in life. You don't have to listen to what society or other people tell you to do. You're talking to a YouTube astrologer, for Christ's sake. And I would really pay attention to what is exciting you on Wednesday, but what is stopping you. And listen to what is stopping you. I think another part of it too, what I do like about the sun squaring Saturn is, okay, you have all of these dreams and goals. Are you even willing to do the work for it? Do you even know what that work entails? Because something I really love about the whole entrepreneur, personal development stuff is like, this is something Alex Hormozy says. Here I go quoting Alex Hormozy. But this is so true. The work works on you more than you work on it. And I look at the sun square Saturn and Pisces as like, okay, if you want to go there, you can, but you have to do the work that involves that. And if you're not even familiar with what that work is, it's like, again, the work works on you more than you work on it. So if you have a goal of, let's say, you know, buying a house in cash, and it's like, okay, well, I got to save up, you know, it's 2023, so $1 bajillion for a fucking, you know, shed. How do I save $1 bajillion? And it's like, well, you got to make $1 bajillion. And then you're like, I can't make $1 bajillion, but you go, well, I really want a house. So let me be creative. And how can I get out of my own limitations? How do I get in my own frame of mind to say, I need to make $1 bajillion? Does that make sense? I just feel like the sun squaring Saturn is like a real like check on like, all right, you can be excited all day long, but you know, talk is cheap. Look at the scoreboard. Are you doing the work for it? Are you committed to that goal? Are you willing to do what it takes internally? Because you could sit here and be a little baby all day long and say, oh, well, I can't because the way I was raised and I was 3. And it's just like, that's all stories that you tell yourself as to why you can't do X, Y, and Z. People have had it worse than you have been able to do X, Y, Z. What stories do you tell yourself, and why do you believe those stories? Of course, because you get something out of it. You get some sort of validation. You end up being right, but you're not happy. Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? If you want to be happy, sometimes you have to realize that maybe the stories that you've told yourself aren't right. Maybe you're not right in the fact that you say, oh, I can't do this, or these are my limitations, or this is the worldview I have to have. So Wednesday's a philosophical day, and it's the sun square Saturn. We're talking about the planet of light and the planet of darkness. I know the sun's not a planet, but just that's what it is. The sun is the planet of light, Saturn is the planet of darkness, and they are at odds with one another. The light says, be optimistic, be fruitful, be abundant. But the planet of darkness says, what is stopping you internally for reaching that goal? We get to Thursday. The moon will, again, what I like about, this is me kind of coming back to Wednesday. The moon goes into Aries and trines the sun in Sagittarius. So there is this like very optimistic, hopeful, fire, passion, energy going on. But as we get to Thursday, the moon will then make an opposition to Venus and make a trine to Mercury. I love this. Venus in Libra, opposite moon in Aries. It's so like, well, I only love it because it's the moon contacting Venus in Libra. Give me any moon contact Venus in Libra. But with the moon in Aries is very like, we want to be aggressive. We want to be, you know, moon in Aries opposite Venus in Libra reminds me of like being like texting. Bear with me, this is an analogy, okay, but most of you are women, so you've probably had this experience. But like Moon in Aries is being like the fuck boy texting you, be like, let's fuck, let's bone, want to come over like at 3 a.m. or like hitting you up at 3 a.m. being like, come over or something like that. Versus Venus and Libra is like, wine and dine me, like have some manners, like treat me like a lady. And so the moon opposite Venus is like, you might want to push forward onto something, like you're emotionally ramped up on something, but as it goes opposite Venus and Libra, like that's not the game we play. Like you got to dance, you know. I heard a new saying the other day that I really like, and it's I don't even know if this is related to it, but it's like you got to dance with the one you brought. I really like that one. That's a very fun saying. But the moon opposite Venus is, especially just in Libra, is like, hey, you can't just get what you want, maybe. But like, for example, like in sales, like you don't, like if you're in sales at all, like you don't just be like, buy my product, idiot. Like that's so moon and Aries. I mean, that's also a sales tactic that can work at times. But Venus and Libra is like, you got to play the game. You got to say like, you know, what are your needs? You got to do that selling. You got to do that, what's that fucking word? Perusing? That's not the right word. You guys got me so in my head about the words I'm using. But anyway, moon opposite Venus. You can't just push for the throttle. You can't just force it. You have to kind of wine and dine. You kind of have to, you know, work with people to get what you want. But then the moon after that makes it trine to Mercury and Sag, where it's like, okay, I'm feeling some opposition from like, you know, or for example, the moon in Aries is very like rushing things. And if you rush things, they're not going to be as beautiful as maybe that they could be. After the moon goes opposite Venus and then the moon trines Mercury, there is a being able to say things like boldly with confidence. The moon in Aries trining Mercury and Sag is just like, you know, you ever got that friend, you just get like a couple drinks in them and they're off. They're saying everything you can't say. I mean, that's kind of me, but I don't even need to be drinking to say things I shouldn't be saying. But that's like moon in Aries. It's like those memes where you're at the family dinner. I mean, isn't this Thanksgiving? I think this is Thanksgiving. I might be wrong, but it's like that one uncle. It's like let's not bring politics up at Thanksgiving, and then it's like an Alex Jones clip, and he's just like liberal. Like that's how I think of the moon in Aries trining Mercury and Sag. Just like get a little bit of a drink, and we're just saying shit now that maybe people do like, maybe they don't like, but either way, it's just yapping at the end of the day. Same thing with the moon in Aries trining Mercury and Sag reminds me of also like just getting coked out and just yapping and blah, 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 and it's going nowhere. It's again just like getting drunk with your friends. You make a business plan, you talk till 5 a.m. about it, you go to quote unquote bed, you close your eyes essentially, and the next morning no one remembers what the fuck that was and why I even brought it up, and it's stupid. That's what I think of the moon trine Mercury. But I think what is exciting about it is it's still passion. Like it's still a way to get the passion out and to like have the fun and to get that fire inside you roaring. Like, so whatever it is on Thursday with the moon in Aries trining Mercury and Sag, there's a level of just being invested into combativeness and ambition and drive, and that being able to like, again, Mercury and Sag is like, well, I have this idea and I have this idea and let me try this. I think it's a good way to like see what kind of different woods catch on fire, right? Like you want to throw all of your irons in the fire, and that's how I look at this moon trine Mercury thing. So then we get to Friday. The moon is then going to conjoin the North Node in Aries, so we're really off to the races now. Then the moon will ingress into Taurus, where it is a little bit more about slowing down, taking heed, being like, what do I have? Where do I need to feel more secure, more stable, more at peace? And it will sextile Saturn immediately. So this is kind of coming back to Monday, where it's like, where do I need to have that boundary and kind of do things one step at a time? The moon goes into Taurus, where it's like, all right, now we're in a little bit of a rhythm, and now I'm seeing the rewards of taking my time with something, especially as it leaves the sextile to Saturn and conjoins Jupiter. We are seeing the rewards of taking our time, and we are seeing the rewards of knowing exactly what we value and what's worth our energy. But the big thing that we have on Friday is Mars ingresses into Sagittarius, where now we're really off to the races. Like, again, Mars, like, coming back to that bow and arrow analogy, Mars is much more of like the actual arrow. Like, it's time to release and shoot at our target. Mars won't square Saturn until Saturday, technically. But what's nice about Mars and Sag is fights, conflicts, drive, ambition, energy is now directed through faith. Like, Mars and Sag is like, you got to jump first and think later. Act first, ask questions later. Mars in Sagittarius is very like it's definitely like philosophical battles, like arguing with people over like religion or beliefs. So again, a lot of fun Thanksgiving holiday stuff here. But another way I look at Mars and Sag is like the thing that is going to motivate you and drive you and slightly piss you off is, again, like, what is your vision? What is your target? What is your goal? Where do you want to go? And as we get to Saturday, I think Saturday is more important for Mars and Sag because Mars goes into Sag on Friday. There is kind of a feeling of relief, but then it immediately squares Saturn on Saturday, where again, Mars and Saturn are the two malefic planets, the two not fun planets, and they're at odds with one another. And the way I look at squares is kind of like if an opposition is like a Mexican standoff, it's like me and you don't like each other. Like we are completely 180 degrees on a separate perspective. Mars, like a square, is much more of like, okay, we're kind of on the same side, but we have way different ideas on what the solution is or how we go about it. And so Mars and Sag is saying like, we should just go pedal to the metal. I will just, whatever it, again, I talk a lot about Sagittarius being just like taking your car and driving off into the desert, blasting Deftones or whatever loud music you want to, and just running away from all your problems. But with Mars squaring Saturn, wherever you go, there you are. You can't do that this time. It's like sometimes we can make up these goals in our head to just escape the current reality that we're in or to escape the feeling that we have right now. And it's one of those things of having to recognize what those feelings are right now and be able to say like, okay, like you might hit all these goals, but you still might be like the same person, or you might still have the same issues that you want to run away from. And no amount of money, no amount of, love, no amount of whatever in the world is going to get you far enough away from what your problems are. And so I feel like Mars squaring Saturn is like knowing that you have to like face the demons. Like you can still go towards your goals. You could still pursue the path you're envisioning, but you just can't run away, if that makes sense. Like you can't just avoid it all. You can't just say, I don't like this anymore. I need to move on to the next thing. It's like, okay, well, I still have a goal. I still have a point B that I want to hit. I still have a target. But rather than saying, oh, I'm going to focus on this so I can run away from all the problems I don't want to deal with, it's much more of like Saturn and Pisces is like, slow your roll a little bit. Take your time. You don't need to be antsy to go out. Another thing Alex Hormozy says that, again, he's been spitting some just shit lately that's so good. Like patience is just finding out what to do in the meantime. And so with Mars and Sag being very impatient, and Saturn and Pisces is like really good at patience. Saturn and Pisces reminds me of just like very like yoga monks meditating in the mountains for 10,000 years. Finding what to do in the meantime until you can get to where you need to go. What are the building blocks that it's going to take to get where you need to go? And even though with Mars square Saturn, it's like you want to hit the gas, you're getting on the 10 freeway, and it is stop and go traffic. And you're thinking, that's another good analogy too, is like Mars and Sag squaring Saturn. It's like you're a little bit late for work, you're a little bit late for your appointment, and you get on the freeway and it's dead stop traffic. So you're like, I need to go here, I need to go there, I need to go faster, let me circumvent, and then you end up getting in a wreck and making everything worse. Versus like, hey, this is what I love about California. Like Denver people get so butthurt about the traffic here, and it's like, it's pretty bad because there's one freeway, but like in California, one time when I was traveling from LA to Beaumont before the pandemic. I left at like Thursday at 5 p.m. and it took me 4 hours to go from LA to Beaumont. During the pandemic, when everything shut down, one of the things I was doing was going 110 and 115 all around LA. Because if you lived in LA during the pandemic, there was 0 people on the road and it was a lot of fun. But when there was no one on the road during the pandemic, I literally went from LA to Beaumont in 45 minutes. So one drive that took me 45 minutes also took me 4 hours. Really big difference there. But why I'm bringing this up is in California, when you hit traffic, you just accept it. You listen to the radio, you text or you scroll, you just look out the window. You just say here I am, there's nothing I can do about it. And so I feel like on Saturday with Mars squaring Saturn, it's like you might really want to go fast and escape, but you're in dead stop traffic. And you can be antsy and irritated and frustrated, but that doesn't help you. That doesn't help the other drivers. You might as well just be patient and know that you're going to get to your destination when you're supposed to get to your destination. Saturday, Mercury enters shadow. This is the other highlight that we have going on. So Mercury is, again, communication, our thoughts, our ideas, our intellect. It is in detriment. We are having a lot of crazy ideas, and we're saying a lot of crazy things. And then Mercury enters shadow, or whatever the fuck we're cooking up in our minds, we're going to come back to this. Maybe we're thinking of an idea that's like, maybe that's so large and that's so big that you sit on it, you stew on it for a little while. Whatever is being communicated during this time, think about messages, think about mail, think about emails. Something around this time on Saturday, you're going to get an email or you're going to say something or someone's going to say something to you that you're going to come back to at this point. Like something's going to get fucked up. So if you're like, I'm going to make all of these purchases and make all of these plans on this, it's like, well, those plans will probably get delayed and not necessarily foiled, but just know we're not like, it's not as simple as this is my plan. This is what's going to go. This is what's going to happen. It's like sometimes you have to kind of create a framework, like a general idea, and then you have to really sift through those ideas to really create a framework. And that's how I feel like this Mercury retrograde is going to be. Mercury will retrograde in Capricorn, where it's like change of plans. Mercury back into Sagittarius, going back to the drawing board. What's the vision? What's the whole goal? What's the idea? We get clear on that. Then we can move forward with the plan. So Mercury goes into shadow. Just pay attention to this day. We're going to come back to it. There's probably going to be some communication that isn't very clear that you're going to get. And then the moon conjoins Uranus. Instability. Like the moon conjoining Uranus is like, have you ever been in traffic when like, it's like, let's say there's like an accident, but then you're in traffic right as the accident gets cleared up and the traffic goes away and you're like, oh, look, I'm moving forward again. That's how I look at the moon conjoining Uranus, is like some sort of random event that ends up, working out in your favor. And then we get to Sunday. And on Sunday, the moon will make a sextile to Neptune, but then it's going to ingress into Gemini. It is going to square Saturn and go opposite Mars. And we have the full moon in Gemini. This full moon in Gemini reminds me of the Office meme where everyone's pointing guns at each other. Because as the moon goes into Gemini and our emotions, right, are connected to communication, to our thoughts, to our logic, the moon will make a square to Saturn where it's like, hey, that limiting belief I have about myself doesn't make sense. Or you might say, hey, I need, like, there's a full moon is lighting up the night, lighting up the dark, what we don't always get to see. Gemini, it's like information, it's communication. It's going to square Saturn and Pisces. So there's like something that you're going to hear or be said that doesn't jive well. You ever said, like, someone could say something to you that just like hits so deep, but it's like your subconscious deep, so you're not aware, and so you just react and like yell at them. They're like, yo, they're stupid, but they actually really fucking hit home somewhere. The moon will make a square to Saturn, and then it'll go opposite Mars. Kind of a tough day because it's also the full moon in Gemini. And this full moon in Gemini is ruled by Mercury in detriment. And on Monday next week, Mercury will square Neptune. Where I think the issue with this is you are going to realize what you don't know. Do you know that saying, you don't know what you don't know? Well, on Sunday, you might actually have some awareness of what you don't know. And that's good. We want to explore, like, we don't want to think that we know everything. We want more evidence and things to come to our awareness that we don't know so that we can work with that, learn it, and do better. But I think on Sunday, there's just kind of like oh, this is happening, and that's not what I thought this was, and that makes me want to get antsy and leave and avoid and run away, but I can't. And on Monday, Mercury is squaring Neptune, where it's not even clear what information you're getting. Like, just the information you're getting is just totally fucking up the vibe, totally fucking up your plans, and there's a lot of confusion. So I think Sunday is kind of like, expect for information and answers to be revealed in a way that you're probably not going to like, and that's going to be chaotic. But it's not even in concrete, though. It's like Mercury and Sag squaring Neptune. It's like, whoever told you that, maybe it was the wrong email. Maybe it was, a wrong, like, just something about it isn't right. But we'll be talking about that next week. Next week, we have Mercury squaring Neptune. We have Venus conjoining the South Node, a bittersweet ending. And we have Mercury ingressing into Capricorn, getting ready for it to go retrograde. And we have Venus squaring Pluto. So with that being said, I love and appreciate you guys. I'll be seeing you next week.